So welcome everyone. I'm excited to be here to chat with you today, and especially excited to chat about climate change. So a bunch of us got together, a bunch of the presenters today got together for dinner last night, and we were talking about sustainability and what's the issue with fixing it and getting things right. And I think the issue is data. It's data, it's technology. And so I think this group here today brings a lot of energy to this subject because you're innovative, you're technology-minded, and I think that is really at the heart of the issue. And I know Rebecca will talk a little bit more about that later. So first of all, why are we talking about climate change? We're talking about climate change because climate change exists. And fortunately, I don't come across too many people who deny that climate change exists anymore, which was where things were probably at a few years ago. Climate change exists. We're seeing more and more climate events happening, floods, fires, famines, etc. And because climate change exists, we need to figure out how to fix it. How can we take carbon out of the environment? How can we figure out where to apply our limited resources? And so one of the places that I think financial institutions play a really important role is the business decisions that they make with respect to sustainability. And that includes for insurance companies, how are they insuring things? What are they insuring? Is everything that was insurable in the past still insurable? For banks, who are we going to lend money to, and what is going to be the interest rate on that? Is it going to be variable depending on what is being done with the money being lent? And wealth and asset management, how do we invest the money? How do supers invest your money? Should they invest in green products versus maybe the certain industries that put more carbon into the environment? One other thing that I wanted to mention on this slide is people use the term ESG, they use the term sustainability, they use the term climate change, and they do that a little bit interchangeably. In fact, I find myself doing that as well, but they actually are quite different concepts. And right now the focus is very much on climate change. How do we prevent global warming of our world? But sustainability is linked to that, and it's about how do organizations manage themselves to be of value currently and to the world and to the larger community in the future. And ESG is part of that as well, environmental, social governance. So it's basically a catch-all phrase that captures a lot of both social as well as environmental items. So on this slide, I want to chat about the fact that in short order, many organizations in Australia are going to have to provide mandatory sustainability reporting. And to get to mandatory sustainability reporting, there's a whole bunch of things that have to be done. It's an incredibly heavy lift to get there. And many organizations that I talk to just aren't aware of how much work it is. I've had insurance companies say to me after hearing everything that they have to do to get ready for this reporting that they had no idea, and that it's going to be worse than IFRS 17 implementation, which any of you who have been involved in that know that that's quite a statement. There's a lot to be done. There's internal controls, there's operating systems, there's processes, there's governance, there's strategy, there's tech and data. There's a lot of things that have to be put into place in order for organizations to be ready. So the current proposal by the Australian Treasury is that the largest entities will have to provide this mandatory reporting by fiscal 25. For June 30th year-end companies, which most are in Australia, that's just a few months away from being in the start of that year. And where are we in Australia? Well, we have a Treasury consultation that just closed that we don't know what the final answer is going to be. We have the Australian Accounting Standards Board who have issued sustainability standards that are still out for public comment until March 1st. And we have assurance standards that aren't even out for a proposed statement yet. So what does that mean? There's a lot of uncertainty still in how to get to where we need to get to. But I don't think we should slow down. So what are those standards based on? They're based on those things on the right. And some of you who have done some sustainability work or have been involved in sustainability reporting for your organization may have heard of the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. It's existed for a couple decades, and it is based on governance, strategy, risk, and metrics and targets. And really, that's what the international sustainability standards are all about. They're based on that. And in turn, that's what the Australian standards are all about. There's a lot to that, though. So when you think about what you have to report, well, you have to report your carbon footprint. So easy, right? You have to report your scenario analysis. What is going to be the impact on your financial statements of a 1.5 degree change in global temperature? Not so easy, maybe. So there's a lot of work that's going into that. Really, what I want you to take away is a couple of things. One is this is happening fast, and it's happened internationally. Europe is quite far ahead of us. I think Australia is a bit behind. So it's happening quickly. There's a heavy lift, like I already mentioned. And third, the organizations that do this best are value-led. They're not treating this as a compliance exercise. They're treating this as a way of getting good information out so that we can make really important decisions based on that information. So one of the toughest things about the reporting that I just talked about is actually calculating the greenhouse gas emissions. What the protocol is to do this is to divide up your greenhouse gas emissions into 3 different categories. Scope 1, that's the emissions that you generate as an organization. Well, in financial services and insurance, that's not very much. It's your office, it might be your leased cars. Scope 2 is purchased energy. Again, it's not so hard to find that. You can look at your energy bills and capture most of that. But then there's Scope 3, which by definition is everything indirect, upstream and downstream. And there's some examples listed there. And one of the most complicated ones is on the downstream side at the far right is investments. So for example, a super holds investments. They have to actually include as part of their reporting all the greenhouse gas emissions of the companies that they're investing in. Insurance companies, not in the current proposal, but shortly, are going to have to disclose the greenhouse gas emissions of everything that they insure. Banks are going to have to disclose the greenhouse gas emissions of all the loans that they make and what that money is being used for. So the financial institutions have this huge, amazing ability to influence the environment and to help all of those stakeholders transition. But it is going to be a lot of work to be able to do that. And this is one of the big challenges of the day. Okay, so how do you get to great reporting? First, you have to understand your current environment. What's your current state inventory? What kind of information and data do you currently have? What are your peers doing? What's the regulatory environment? Then you have to assess who are your key stakeholders? What's material to them? What do you actually need to get to from a regulatory perspective? Develop a plan. Do you have enough people? Do you need to upskill? Do you need to bring more people in? Do you need to educate your board in different ways? You have to develop that strategy, and then you have to implement that strategy. And finally, you have to engage and report. And that's going to be a bit iterative. And before I pass it on to Rebecca, I'm just going to set the challenges, a few of the challenges, and hopefully she can answer them because she's way smarter than I am. The first one is, how do you get all this data? Or how do you estimate what you can't get direct access to? There's a lot of inconsistency in how data is used and in the estimation that's used. There's gaps in the data as well. There's constantly evolving requirements. So we've talked a lot about climate because that's the focus of the regulators right now. But before long, it's going to be biodiversity. It's going to be social. There's going to be a whole bunch of new standards that are going to come into place after the climate standard is in place. So we're going to see systems that need to evolve. And then you have to comply now. You have to meet those certain compliance requirements. Your strategies may go beyond that, and you'll want to meet that. But you also have to be prepared for the future. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Rebecca. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Lara. Hopefully my mic is working. So I think for the first challenge around the inconsistency of data with gaps, what we're seeing in the market is while organisations, there's a number of organisations that are offering third-party ESG data sets, insurers particularly are finding that not one of the offerings actually meets all of their requirements. So what that means is they're going to need to integrate a number of external and internal data sources, as well as potentially add new data points as they baseline their reporting approach over the next 2 to 3 years. So we see the best solution, and what many of the leaders in the market are doing is actually taking a flexible approach to their data capture systems. I'm a total graph DB geek, and so pleasingly for myself, we're seeing a number of our clients actually moving towards graph database technology, which makes it incredibly simple to model complex data and also add new data points as they're looking at new reporting requirements come through. In terms of constantly evolving requirements, that often means overspend in our world. And so what we're seeing is many financial services clients are moving towards a data product approach to actually combat this, because what it allows them to do is to build out new features for their data assets in an iterative way without having to spend a lot of time on rework and also reinvesting in their data assets. I guess a bonus consideration for this challenge is, as Lara said, ASRS, so the climate regulations coming through, will have an external assurance requirement. So for the technology and data teams, it's important that they consider this data the same way they consider their financial statement data. Traceability and the lineage of both the data but also the calculation logic is going to be so important, so they can design for assurance right from the start and it's not a surprise. Our final challenge: how can you comply now, potentially, as Lara said, with the climate reporting standards, and then in the future meet new strategic ESG use cases and actually compete? Well, clients are really looking at a modular approach, not just for their data stack, but also their technology stack. And so we're seeing a number shifting towards microservices architectural approach, and this is a perfect use case for it. I'm not going to drain this slide because I have gone through a number of the considerations in the previous slide, but our global team has been working with some of the clients and regions that are further ahead of Australia and built out a really mature reference architecture for ESG. So if anyone's interested in hearing more, we can talk about it after the session. But what's more important to talk about is actually where do we see the opportunity or the white space for insurtechs in the ESG domain. And so ESG is a domain that is a mile deep and a mile wide, and it just continues to get bigger as the requirements evolve. There are a number of big tech players, and so I had some logos in here but had to remove them for compliance. But we've got some things around, Microsoft, SAP, they're all moving into the ESG domain. They're really focusing on carbon accounting and carbon management. And so there's a number of different use cases. And what we see for the opportunity for insurtechs is finding a niche challenge that requires a deep solution that's specific to a client's use case. We think that, and the highlighting isn't fantastic, but particularly in the risk management space, so your controls framework as an example, as new regulations come through, so nature, biodiversity, there's a real opportunity there, and also within business logic and decisioning that is contextual, so that's really important. Okay, on to the next slide. So we've spoken a lot about climate reporting and disclosure today, but we also believe that there's a way to leverage data and technology to completely rethink the way that we approach climate risk for insurers. And we're using the Nexus for Insurance platform to do just that. And if you approach this logically through the insurance value chain, The first step is around mitigate. So this is about capturing new granular data around the actions that are happening at individual properties to actually reduce the impact of climate perils. So I guess for a bushfire as an example, that would be about reducing vegetation around the home. That's about installing a metal roof maybe. And then actually capturing that data and taking it into the next step in the value chain, which is around underwriting and pricing. So if I go to Lara and I say to Lara, this is the cost of insuring your property based on your postcode and your type of property with our company. And if you're able to give me data about the actions that you have already taken, and we can take that into account for the underwriting and pricing, that will reduce the cost to us as the insurer and also to Lara as the homeowner. And assess. So there's always going to be climate perils, and they're probably going to increase. Well, they are going to increase over the next couple of years. So this is around being able to predict when these are going to happen and what the impact is going to happen, hopefully to reduce that impact and to reduce the cost to insurers. Using publicly available data sets such as bushfire risk and also historical events, we're beginning to be able to more accurately predict the impact of these events. And finally, to repair. So this is about returning to the status quo as soon as possible. So using data and technology, we believe that we're going to be able to improve the customer experience and also, of course, reduce the cost to insurers. I might skip that slide. And so, look, as I said, we're already doing this, and we're building out our Nexus for Insurance platform to actually meet these use cases. We are wanting to identify world-leading technology, hopefully, from some insurtechs in this room. We've already actually done a scan of 255 climate risk and insurtech companies globally. But if there's others that are opening to partnering with us, please come and talk to Lara, myself, or Andy in the booth after the session. We are also looking for insurers that would be open to being a marquee client and actually co-developing this solution with us. So if that's you, also come and find us in the booth after the session. But Lara, over to you.
Great. So just to conclude, how can insurtechs really play their part in helping to combat climate change? So one of the things that you can do to help your clients is from a timing perspective. They need information, they need capability quickly in order to meet the demands that are going to be placed on them by regulators and other stakeholders. So being able to deliver in a timely manner is huge. So if you can help in that area, that's great. The other thing is the evolution of the standards. I talked about the fact that in Australia there's a lot of different standards in play. Internationally, while they may be more set, there's going to be new standards emerging, and they're just going to continue. I don't see an end in sight from the social, environmental, and governance standards that will be issued by the International Standards Board and then in Australia. So we need flexibility in the systems. So that's something that you can help the insurance companies with. And finally, I think because this is a new area, it's still very immature in Australia. I think there's a ton of opportunity to be innovative and use technology to bring the industry forward. So I think those are three areas that insurtechs can really play an important role. With that, I really want to thank you for your time. Again, as Rebecca said, we'll be at the booth. So if you do want to have a chat with us, please stop by. Thanks so much.